Welcome to the Above Average podcast with me, Mark Lewis. If you're hearing this, you're listening to the public version of our members' podcast. These versions are normally shortened highlights of the full episodes available to our Patreons. However, this is the last in a series of 3 based around Hyrox, and all have been made available in full for everybody. We have no ads or sponsors, and that is made entirely possible by those Patreon members. So if you like what we're doing here, consider supporting us over there. Today, I am joined by Jade, Skillen, Hyrox master coach and all-round expert in the world of health and fitness. We discuss illness, injury, and when to start training again after a tough event. We also touch on Burger King, David Goggins, and social media. Jade Skillen, welcome to the Above Average podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
You're very welcome. It's taken a little bit of what's the word? Organisation to get you here.
It's probably my half rather than yours. I know that I've been a little bit of a nightmare.
We've kept saying, please come on, and you've eluded us.
You got to try and knock on my front door. That'll be all right, and then just drag me.
Yeah, all the best things are worth waiting for. I
hope so. I'm hoping this can help a lot of people as well.
Well, indeed, that'd be amazing. It could probably help me because we're talking about illness and injury, and I'm a combination of both right now. Before we dive into things, for the people that do not know you, which actually in the Hyrox world, and many of our listeners are obviously Hyroxers, won't be many. Most of those people will know who you are. But for those that don't, tell us a bit about your background, because if I summarise it, it will be ex-footballer who now coaches Jen, and I'm guessing there's more to it than that in the middle. So fill us in on, who are you and why are you so credible in the world of health and fitness?
Well, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that title as well. I think going back to what you just said then as well about many people will know you in the Hyrox world. I think they'll know Hyrox Jade, but sometimes don't always know the real Jade. And I think times like this give me kind of opportunity to, actually kind of go through what's led me to be in the place and the space that I am now. So football was my first love. Football was everything to me from a very young age. From the moment I could walk in my grandma's garden, I was kicking a football, left-footed, may I add. So was fairly unique in the game back then, being a girl playing on boys teams, and then second realizing that I kicked with my left as opposed to my right, but I write with my right. So all the way through kind of to about 22 years old, I was actually playing football. So got to sort of the highest level in the sport, had a bit of a cut short career with football due to illness, which I think has led me to the place I am now as a coach, essentially, and understanding the body on a deeper level than just, how you feeling today, surface level kind of, I guess capacity in training. It's actually about kind of understanding what is actually going on, right? So started with football. I then set up a business in the fitness industry, which kind of really needed a lot of commitment and time at that point, which kind of led me to having to make a bit of a decision. There wasn't any money in the women's game when I was playing. So nothing like it is now with the girls in the Euros. And, some of the girls I actually used to play with, like Jill Scott, who are now retiring, which is really depressing. And those girls, now can really make a career and a living out of it. Whereas back kind of 11 years ago, it was really kind of not easy to do that. So I had to make a decision. Do I keep traveling into London 5 times a week for training? I was at Tottenham at that point, and a season at West Ham. And then, I made the decision that I had to stop playing. My business took priority. I threw everything I had into that. And then found upon Spartan racing, which was kind of my next stage in my kind of athletic endeavors, should we call it. I guess, essentially I was missing the competitive aspect of it, of essentially competing, and something kind of needed to fill that void. Should have dropped my ego a little bit and played a local team, but there was the ego driven Jade that was like, I'm not playing at that standard. And, so for me, it was like, okay, let's look at a totally different sport. And I literally tried a Spartan race locally to me. And I literally ran in Nike Vaporflies. I'm sure Mark will tell you, all about Spartan racing. You definitely need a trail shoe. I'm telling you that. But I ran out there in Vaporflies, which have no grip whatsoever, for a bit of fun with a couple of friends. And I did quite well in it. So that was kind of my next stage. And Yeah, I eventually, after 4 years of competing in Spartan racing, sort of all over the country, I then started to take it a little bit more seriously. Got myself a running coach, and yeah, really signed a contract with Spartan to become part of their pro team when they first did that. And which that kind of for the next 2 years, so kind of my mid-20s, took me to different places. I did a couple of world championship events, a few European events in Spartan racing as well, Tough Mudders, you name it. And then I went across to Germany before anybody. I think people were calling it Hyrox at that point. No one.
Yeah, some still do.
Yeah, so no one in my life had even heard of Hyrox. Literally, I could have mentioned it to any single person, and not one person had heard of it. So George Edwards, other master trainer, and a couple of my Spartan friends, we all decided to go and try out one of the first ever Hyrox events in Germany. And I was like, this is fine. I do a bit of running and some obstacles. Like, it's probably about the same. Had my ass handed to me, basically, in the first race. And from there, I kind of started to develop this system where I was always alongside me as an athlete. Coach Jade was already working with a lot of functional fitness athletes at that point as well. So I was preparing people for turf games, national fitness games, and all of these kind of functional fitness competitions. And I really started to kind of take my knowledge of how I was doing a lot of compromise running anyway in Spartan, right? And how that can carry over to Hyrox very well, but with some different stimulus and elements laid in. So I started to train myself, trial different protocols. I started to work with a few athletes in the UK. And from there, it kind of has gone mad the last kind of 3.5 years. So yeah, this has led me to kind of where I am now in the Hyrox world, and competing and coaching can sometimes be a struggle juggle, should we call it? But I feel like I'm doing an okay job at it. So
actually, out of interest, veering off path with this question, but I'm interested because obviously I've done a lot of Spartan myself. I not quite to your level. In fact, I was going to say my claim to fame was getting across the monkey bars without falling off. So that
was it backwards?
Doesn't look quite as good as I don't even recall. I just remember getting to the end and thinking, "Wow, I'm elite." So what I'm interested in is you went from Spartan and you were good at Spartan. I mean, as you say, you were competing at the top end of that. You went into Hyrox and got your butt kicked. Out of interest, what in particular was your weakness in Hyrox? Because my frustration with Hyrox is that there's a lot of running still for me. And I'd have thought if you're a great Spartan, which obviously in obstacle course racing is much more focused on the running. I'd have thought in simple terms that a great Spartan racer would be able to drop into Hyrox and just be great from the get-go.
Yeah.
So what was your weakness in Hyrox?
Yeah, and we are seeing a lot of that. It does. There are elements of it that carry over very well. My slight issue with the transfer over to Hyrox was I was always very heavily reliant on my obstacle efficiency and my strength in Spartan. So the running aspect of Spartan was always the weaker element, right? So the girls would have the head. A lot of the elite girls I was racing with at that time would have a little bit of a one-up on me with regards to their ability to, withstand elevation and obviously a lot of the running aspect. Whereas I would get through burpees like there's no tomorrow. If I'd slipped off an obstacle, I would be able to carry the concrete ball on my shoulder, whereas some of the girls were struggling to carry it near their knees. I would be very, very quick through obstacles as well. So I would always kind of have that. I would lean to that side of my performance with OCR. So obviously when it came to Hyrox, I was like, okay, I've got this. Like all of my strength components were amazing, but it was with Spartan racing, you have an element, especially when you do all distances. So I kind of didn't specialize in one distance. So for me, it was like, I was doing a lot of volume of running, a lot of trail running, a lot of elevation to really try and maximize my aerobic conditioning, essentially. When I carried over to Hyrox, it's the pacing strategy that's very different, right? So with Hyrox, you are essentially sitting at threshold for a longer period of time. Whereas what I found with OCR for all of my years is you can afford to pull back at times. You can afford to gain recovery. You can afford to just kind of like pull the brakes every so often to just get that recovery. There's no time for that in Hyrox. So the first couple of events, or the first two events probably for me, was really kind of adjusting the ability to not hit my lactic threshold too fast. Because in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, Spartan Beast would normally take me, a comfortable-ish 3.5 hours.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I go to Hyrox, I'm like, okay, this should take me hour and 15. I had no idea at that point. And I was like, if I just go for it and hold on, I'll be fine. Right. And it was actually the point after the sled pull that really kind of affected me. So, I remember actually, really trying to do it hand over hand. I had no idea about technique and efficiency at that point. And I remember the event taking me something like 1 hour 20. I think it was like 1 hour 27, something like that, which is, a way off what it would be now. So yeah, it was a good transition, but I also very much struggled to carry on with the Spartan while training for Hyrox.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I loved going into Hyrox because as a bigger, heavier athlete, the running aspect, especially super and beast level Spartans, were just, I enjoy it, but I'm not designed for running over mountains for 4 hours, and I'm not designed for much actually, but I was certainly not designed for that. And in Hyrox, at least, I would rather kind of just go flat out for an hour and a bit and get it done, rather than think, oh, there's another mountain to go up and down. So yeah,
Sure.
interesting. So these are the three things that I want to talk about. And the reason I want to talk about them is because I get people asking me about them, because as you'll know, social media sometimes implies a high level of credibility and expertise that isn't always appropriate. And I'm a reasonable example of that. I'm basically just an average guy that works out a lot and sticks it on YouTube, and people are very kind and watch and find that entertaining, hopefully. But it doesn't mean I'm an expert at all. So I get these questions, and I have to just say to people, I really don't know. But fascinating. Thanks for asking. Sorry I was useless. And these are the three areas that I get asked about a lot. What do I do when I'm injured? What do I do when I'm ill? And also, and it kind of ties in with that, when I'm feeling run down because I've just done something like an ultra marathon or a Hyrox or a Spartan, or basically anything that leaves me just feeling just kind of run over, how soon can I get back in the gym? And is there anything I should be doing in particular? So basically, it's just kind of people that are getting themselves bashed up. And it's not the kind of the glamorous, sexy end of training that people like to talk about. It's the kind of not the horrible end either, really. It's just the kind of reality of it, I suppose, that if you work out a lot and you work out hard, there are going to be times where you're just thinking, oh man, for whatever reason, I don't want to get out of bed today. And I don't know if I should be saying to people, yeah, you should crack on, ignore that limb that's hanging off, or no, slow it down a little bit. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll ask you. So let's dive in with illness, only because illness is actually quite appropriate, because I'm feeling at the moment mildly ill. I don't normally get too ill, but I picked up a cough not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and it just kind of hasn't gone away. And so every morning I'm waking up feeling kind of bunged up and stuffy nose and just feeling run down. That's the best way to describe it. But I'm not ill. I'm not taking any medication for it or anything. And I get lots of people saying to me, yeah, I'm feeling like that at the moment. It's just, the weather, and it's dark and it's miserable, and I'm not feeling 100%. And at the back of my head is my dad, who is about 500 years old. And he would tell me now, as he told me from when I was a young child, shut up, you big baby, and get on with it. In fact, I think he used to tell me something along the lines of, if the ailments are above your neck, like it's a runny nose or a headache, go and exercise. And if it's below your neck, like, I should add, my dad was
like body aches.
Yeah, he was an engineer. He wasn't a doctor. In case anyone was thinking this man sounds like a medical expert, he wasn't. He would say, yeah, so below the neck, worry. Above the neck, get on with it. So I'm thinking that's probably not enough. I think I need to advance my level of illness and training understanding. So yeah, what should people be doing if they're just feeling, ropey?
Yeah, I think the biggest key thing here is like just going right back to kind of like the foundations and basics of ill health, essentially. And I think that the biggest thing to understand, and I know that I've been to the depths of what can be possible if you do not listen to your body. And if you continually ignore your body and the signs and, you know, everything that it's kind of trying to communicate to you because of your, you know, your want and your drive to train and, you know, continue to be better and continue to progress. And, you know, God forbid you miss a training session. And I've been to the experience of actually having ME, and that's what sent me back from America. So when we did the introduction at the beginning, I said I used to play football. So between the age of 17 and 20, I was actually in America playing on a scholarship. So I had to end that scholarship and completely drop out of university. And I lost almost like my love for the game, because I came home and was diagnosed with ME, which for most of you guys that don't know is like chronic fatigue syndrome, but like bedridden, can't get out of bed, right? So I experienced that for 8 months of a year when I was just turning 20. And I vowed to myself that, you know, if anyone ever asks me this question, I will give them my utmost honesty and vulnerability around that, because I think that, you know, it took a lot for me to get back to that. I would say I wasn't right in my body between the ages of 20 and 23. It probably took me about 2.5 years to actually get back to a place where I felt fresh, where I felt healthy, where I felt, you know, energetic and lively. And what led me to the point of getting that bad was not listening to the signs when I should have, right? So what started with a cold and a chest infection, which turned into swine flu, which turned into septicemia, which turned into ME, that chain of events over that 4-month period was like probably one of the most worst times of my life. Now, if that, what led to that is where my knowledge now kind of dives into, right? So I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't just happen to people, right? Something has led my body to be so susceptible to that happening. And then university, Jade didn't listen. She kept, you know, drinking Bud Light with all of my uni friends, getting up for 5 a.m. soccer practice, like, you know, eating the cafe food. I lived down south in America, so everything was fried. And it wasn't until I then got into the health world that I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. Okay. Number one, you wasn't eating one vegetable. Number two, you were drinking alcohol and not recovering properly between training and still demanding that level of, you know, expenditure from your body. And then also leading up to that, if we go a little bit deeper, was a lot of emotional stress going on in my life at that time with my parents and stuff back home before I went to America. So there was like a big kind of catalyst in my life, maybe like a year before that, that was very kind of emotionally upsetting, draining, and everything. So now going back to your question, I think that it's really important that when you are feeling run down, you kind of like look at the key factors of why, right? We don't just kind of ignore it, because how many times does it kind of keep rearing its head, right? I think number one is actually going, okay, how do I feel right now? And I'm actually going to agree slightly with your dad, because there is an element to it whereby if you are feeling body aches, it usually means that a virus or something along the lines of something underlying that's that little bit deeper. So it could be, you know, glandular fever, like you said, a viral infection, something like that. Yeah. If you're experiencing symptoms from the body, like the neck down, there is no physical way that I would train. Okay, because essentially your body is trying to do something. It's trying to fight what it needs to fight. If you're then expending every bit of energy it needs to fight that, then, you know, there's going to be times when you're probably going to either relapse, right? Because you haven't actually let because viruses can lay dormant, right? So it's really important to actually allow the body to completely fight what it needs to fight. If you're experiencing like symptoms head up, like, you know, it's just a sniffle, like a little cold, maybe just a tiny bit of sore throat, I would always like advise, okay, maybe take a rest day, but, you know, you might get away with going 50%. If the symptoms persist or get worse, then it's maybe something we need to look at. Okay, have I taken a deload, right? Have I actually had a deload in the last 8 weeks of training? Have I had a full rest day in the last 7 days? And these are kind of questions I would ask myself. And that's on a training level, right? But on like a nutritional level as well, we can then start to, you know, ask ourselves the question of, okay, you know, am I eating a lot of refined sugars that are going to create a lot of inflammatory response in my body right now? Am I nourishing my body enough to deal with the expenditure that I'm losing, right? So we lose nutrients and minerals through training. If we're not restoring those and we're eating like a lot of beige food and a lot of refined sugars, and it is deep what you're asking me, like, it's a lot of people sort of see it for surface level. I just need to have a rest day. But actually, it is about actually looking that little bit deeper. If you're looking for this to not continually like happen, and then you've got the aspects of sleep, am I recovering enough? Am I doing things to help my body recover? So like, cold showers, all of these different aspects that are going to bring our inflammation down. What we really want to avoid is just staying in an inflamed state. That's the biggest kind of key thing here, is to, really kind of avoid that.
No, that's cool. I say it's cool. You slightly lost me at your dad might be right.
He might be right in the
yeah.
sense of just how much you need to pull back, right? Like if your whole body's aching, it usually means that, you're suffering a bit worse.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it to you
sense.
because I'm not now. Now I just have a blocked up nose every morning, which is annoying. But early on in my short little bug experience, I was getting last week. In fact, I was getting kind of like, am I too hot? Am I too cold? I wasn't sure whether I wanted a jumper on or a t-shirt, and my body was doing stuff. I could tell that that there were things going on inside me to deal with whatever I had, but they weren't serious. I mean, it was literally just a case of, I'm a bit shivery, and now I'm too hot. It was just kind of an annoying level of illness, and so I went and did park run. I went and just did stuff because I thought, well, actually, I wasn't sure what I thought. I thought, well, I knew I could do a park run. I wouldn't keel over, but actually, from what you're saying, while that kind of low level battle is going on internally to get you fixed and right, it probably is best just sitting at home and eating right and doing all the other things that don't stress you out and waiting.
For sure. There's that thing of kind of yin and yang, isn't there? And I think that, when we are so attached to training and we love the feeling it gives us, we love the process of progress. It's almost as if we worry that if we're going to take 3 or 4 days off, that we're going to lose every single thing we've, committed to over the last 6 months. But actually, when we step back and look at an overall picture, are we better to pull back for 3 days and be fully fit to really kind of progress our training? Or are we just going to kind of take half a rest day, get back into training as fast as possible, and then kind of just be, only really feel like we have 50% capacity for the next 2 weeks, right? Because our body's trying to get better and then we suppress. Body's trying to get better, we suppress. So I think sometimes it's about just being really honest and upfront with yourself and being like, do you know what? It doesn't mean that I have to sit on the couch, or it doesn't mean I have to, unless you obviously feel really bad, you could just, go out for a walk in sunlight, get some vitamin D on your skin, increase your hydration, get your steps in still and stuff like that. You still be active, but it's just that kind of that we don't want to do any kind of like adaptive training where we kind of we want our body to like respond to a stimulus. We kind of just want to, keep the body ticking over, get some fresh air, and get the legs moving, even just a zone 2, like 20 minutes, pace walk, or, walk on the treadmill or something.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because I think what I went and did was a 23-minute park run, which for me is not fast enough to be of any real use, but it's probably too fast to allow me to focus on recovering instead. So I should have,
for sure,
I should have stayed at home on that one.
For sure.
Actually, the other thing that's interesting, you mentioned about all the things that you should be doing in addition to your training in terms of your nutrition and your cold plunges and all the other kind of the bits that are often overlooked. Something that springs to mind that I'm often guilty of is that when I'm really on it and my training is going great and I'm feeling great, I am way more likely to ignore all those other things, because I'll think it doesn't matter if I have a couple of Burger Kings because I'm crushing it this week, so I can get away with the Burger Kings. But actually, from what you're saying, the training at that intensity has probably left me in a state where I'm on a bit of a tightrope in terms of my health. And having a Burger King is probably the last thing I should be doing. It's almost, I'm almost better off having a Burger King when my body's expecting it, because I'm just sitting around doing nothing for 6 months. Training at peak intensity and then having a Burger King sounds like it might be a bad strategy.
It's here's the thing that I believe as well is everything in moderation, right? So
You haven't seen my Burger King orders.
I was going to say,
There's
I haven't seen the order. You should have brought your
Yeah.
receipt for me to have a little look at, and then I can make judgment on that. But I definitely
get a monthly
think
invoice.
that
They just send me an invoice. There's a tab I have to clear each month.
you're on a direct debit. It's deliver it to your front door. But everything in moderation. I think it's important. Especially like in the off season, you go on holiday, you let your hair down, you have some stuff you enjoy. But I think it's like anything. You overdo it, and you feel the effects of it, right? So I think that it's really important, especially when we get onto the subject, which I'm sure we'll talk about the post-training window as well. Sorry, the post-competition window,
Yes.
which is where most people reward themselves. And that's actually probably physically and physiologically the worst time that you can have things that are going to probably upset your gut, upset your system, and kind of weaken your immune system in that kind of peak window, because essentially that's your time to replenish as much as possible. So essentially, you've got two kind of things. You've got inflammatory response of nutrition, and you've got inflammatory response of training. So on some of those really hard intensity training sessions where your body is depleted of like vital minerals and nutrients and everything, when we start to eat a lot of foods that contain, heavy MSGs, lots of chemicals, you look on the back of it, it looks like a chemical shitstorm. All of those types of foods, our body isn't used to kind of digesting and utilizing for anything really, right? So it's basically, essentially a lot of it is dead food. So it's not really putting anything back in our system that our body's craving for. And the window after training where we feel that hunger is our body searching for nutrients on a basis of hunger. So it's sometimes not that actually we just need a shit load of food.
Yeah.
It's more actually there's pieces missing of the puzzle right now that I need. It could be sodium, it could be magnesium, it could be calcium, and your body's searching for that, but it can't literally send a signal and go, I need calcium or I need magnesium. So what it's doing is it's hungry, right? So essentially it's about everything in moderation. Like I'll still allow myself a cheat meal every week, but interestingly, I actually do it on my day when I'm kind of doing a steady run or a steady state session, because my body's not going to be so, should I say, kind of stimulated. And it's not going to be, essentially my adrenaline's not high, my cortisol's not high and stuff like that. So a lot of people have it, the other way around, especially a lot of female athletes as well, right? We're like, I've got to earn that. So I'm going to train really freaking hard. And then I'm going to go out and have like 10 cocktails, right? But actually it's going to probably affect their body a lot more than if they were actually go, do you know what? I know I'm going to have a few cocktails tonight, so I'm going to give my body a bit of a break today, right? So it's not in an inflamed state.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because one of the things that I do as well is sometimes when I go on holiday, I'll go on holiday and I'll think, well, I'm going to be eating badly because I'm on holiday. But I'm going to make sure that I compensate for that by training 8 times a day, and I come back from holiday just not feeling as well as someone that trained 8 times a day should feel. And again, from what you're saying, I'm either kind of one or the other really. Either train hard and eat appropriately, or don't. But training like a lunatic and eating like an idiot doesn't seem to go together. Actually, I'm actually finding it quite, because whenever I talk to people that know what they're talking about, I like to sort of log a sort of a mental note that I can use for motivation later on. One of the things that actually strikes me as quite motivating is the idea that when you are training really hard, actually you should be rewarding yourself. Do you know what it's like? Here's what it's like. Jen hates my car analogies.
Haven't heard one yet.
If you have a performance car, you drive a Ferrari or something, you put like great oil in it, great tires on it, you put great petrol in it. You don't put in kind of cheap whatever Asda petrol and oil from the local chip shop, because that would make no sense. Why have the Ferrari if you're going to then kind of adorn it with those things that let it down? And actually that makes sense with training. If I'm going to be training really hard and working out really properly, to then not do the nutrition, the cold showers, the sauna, the other things, that the mobility, the flexibility, the things that complement it.
Sure.
But it is very easy to tell myself I don't need to do that because I've done. Actually, that makes no sense. That's like saying I don't need good tires. I just bought a Ferrari. No, you need you need better tires more than ever. Otherwise, you're going to metaphorically drive into a ditch.
Yeah. And I have this mentality as well, where it's like I wake up and I'm like, I'm going to thank my body for what it does for me. Right. Like I think it's actually having a an awareness where you have a connection with your body, that you are thankful for it doing what it does, thankful for its performance. And I don't think it's until people actually adjust their nutrition that they realize the impact that that can have on their performance, their recovery, and, you know, their overall space in their fitness journey. And I think that a lot of people, you know, there are going to be, of course, there are athletes out there, and there are people that can get away with eating a lot of garbage, right?
Sure.
But
yeah.
if you are somebody who is, I guess my message across with this is, if you are somebody who is constantly in this cycle of ill health and lacking ability to recover, and all these different elements, then, you know, your body is screaming out for support, essentially. You know, if you're demanding X, like you've got to help it along the way as well.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just, otherwise it's just like burning the candle at both ends as well, you know, and you're going to end up with essentially sometimes potentially burnout as well. Burnout doesn't just come from overtraining. Burnout also comes from the fact that your body doesn't have anything really good to run on.
Actually, I like what you say about rewarding your body by kind of giving it the things it needs, but which is obviously the opposite of what many people do, which is they reward themselves by having a piece of cake, which is the classic of parkrun. People will do parkrun, which is awesome, and they should do it. It's great, but they'll then go to the cafe
And donuts
and have a piece of indeed. Yeah, absolutely, and actually. And obviously that comes from a very early age. That's parents saying to so I'm getting one back on my dad now. It's parents saying you did well at whatever, soccer. Have a you know, packet of crisp or something as a reward,
Sure.
as a treat. What they should have been saying is have a carrot or something.
It's not very exciting for kids, though, is it?
I'd have moved.
But it's
I'd have moved
ingrained,
out
like-
at the age of 7. But
I remember my parents like flying us past McDonald's after every single football game. They're like, "You scored today. Let's
Yeah.
go get you a Mackie D's."
Absolutely, yeah. It's the parents'
know?
fault. It's always the parents' fault. Okay, cool. That's I know that's I could talk all day about illness, but that's fascinating. Injury is an interesting one, because I have I'm injured as well. I'm perfect for the podcast today. I've got all these problems. I've got at the moment bad knees, and it prevents me from doing some things. And what I find, and I get this question a lot as well, relating to injuries, is not so much people have questions about how to overcome the injury, because often that just comes down to rest and seeing the appropriate expert in that field. It's almost the psychological issues that go with it, because unlike illness, if I'm ill, I mean, if I'm really ill, I don't want to train. I'm happy to just lie in bed. But with bad knees, you know, I look at my program today, and my program today says deadlifts. Deadlifts were the first thing on it. And in my head, when I hear deadlifts, I want to go and I want to be doing 200 kilo for reps. I want to be deadlift. I can't get close to doing it. My knees would just give up. So I go to the gym and I work out, but I'm already in a kind of, without kind of exaggerating slightly, but depressed state. I'm kind of getting there miserable that I can't do the exercise I want to do. And that's the thing I hear a lot from people that are injured is not so much that their problem is the actual injury. It's just I can't train that lower body because that hurts. Or if it's a shoulder injury, obviously very common, I can't bench, I can't do chins, I can't do anything. I'm stuck. And yeah, people just seem to find it very, it's very easy for people to sort of kind of drift into just, I won't even bother. Yeah, I mean, and I guess certainly with your experience of football and obviously OCR as well, and people picking up injuries, the same thing, that must apply. If you're, and more so actually nowadays with things like OCR and Hyrox, because if you are a bit injured and you're a cyclist and you've injured your shoulder, so what? You can still hold on the bike, can't you?
Sure.
Suck it up. But something like Hyrox, there's almost nothing that you can injure and it doesn't matter. Actually, your head, probably. You could have a
apart from the crazy sled technique,
you can
where
have
they're pushing on their head.
Tell me about it. My head still hurts. I mean, you could lose an ear or something. Reservoir Dog style, and you could still go and do a Hyrox. But there's nothing else. You got a shoulder injury, a knee injury, ankle, anything, hip, whatever. Your training is screwed. So I'm just interested in as much as I'm interested in how you overcome injuries, I'm almost more interested in how you get your head around the fact that you can't train properly.
For sure. I think the thing is around that topic as well is it's probably actually I've been quite lucky in my own kind of journey through OCR I had a torn calf once in 8 years. I didn't experience anything else. And I've always kind of looked after myself. Strength and conditioning was always a really big part of everything I did. A lot of the girls that were playing football were like tearing their ACLs because they weren't doing any kind of foundational strength and conditioning work. But I've kind of always been really strong on agility and changing direction and all of these things that kind of strengthen you from the ground up, really. But it hasn't really been until actually the injury I have now that we were talking about beforehand, that I've kind of actually probably in a really vulnerable and open way as a coach actually comprehended the challenge that it can bring you when you can't do the things that you want to do, right? Because you only really learn through experience. So for me, being somebody who, touch wood, hasn't really experienced a lot, where I don't think I've ever been out for longer than like 3 weeks. So, I've really kind of never experienced the frustrations that can kind of bring, probably until really recently. So this is like perfect to talk about this now. And, I think the biggest thing to understand, especially when you are suffering injury, is, especially with Hyrox, like I know that obviously the word screwed was used, but I definitely think, at the moment I can't run. So like running is the biggest part of Hyrox, right? But at the moment I haven't been able to run for 2.5 weeks. I haven't been able to jump, like low impact, like no sled work, like all of that's been completely stripped away like that. For me, it was like, okay, sit with it for 24 hours. Like I had to sit with that. Like I allow stuff to show and surface, and the fears. It's usually a fear related thing, right? It's usually you start to have these kind of fears. It could be from a past injury, or it could be you attach this like narrative to your head that you're never going to be like there again, or you're never going to be able to get back to where you were. How long is this going to take? Like all of these different things come in. And so I think it's really important, in the first stage of your injury to actually sit with what's showing up. Like, don't just try and bat it away and ignore it. Like actually allow yourself to feel that stuff, because we're only human, right? So if we have a great connection and attachment to growth, then we are going to always want to be growing. And when something comes in and stops us doing that, inevitably we have this kind of fight or flight stimulus where we're like, we're either going to give up or we're going to alter. We've got like two directions, really. Sure. Like, and between the injury kind of like, being diagnosed or, having that impact injury or that moment you're told you can't do something, how long you stay in that gap is probably going to determine whether you go, the complete opposite and start eating rubbish and go really demotivated and just go, do you know what, excuse my friend, fuck the rest of it. Like, I'm not even going to bother until I can do what I can do again. You've kind of got that option. And I think the longer you stay in the space between the fear and the action of taking a different kind of action because something needs to change, the longer you stay in that gap, the more likely you are going to be like in freeze mode, right? Like you're just going to freeze. And I usually think that that's actually coming from an unhealthy sometimes attachment to training, because we rely on it, right? Yeah, we rely on it to make us feel good, right? And it's actually a journey I'm on at the moment to do with like trauma release. We can save that for another day, but we have these attachments with our training and with, competing and all of these things, because yes, they make us feel good, but sometimes they're driven from a place of like pain, right? Because we're so used to like getting in there and like sometimes suffering and stuff like that, that when we can't do that anymore, what's left? And that's why some, athletes you see when they can't compete anymore, they have mental health problems, they suffer mentally, they go down the route of addiction and things like that. You've seen it so often, right? Like with footballers, and they get their identity is just boom, gone within like a heartbeat. So I think it's really important that these little times when we're injured are actually sent probably to test us. Like how well do we cope when we're actually not able to do those things that feed our good feelings on a daily basis? And for me, it's been like, okay, I can't run. I sat with that. I was a moody cow for 5 days, like Arsbell, like I was horrible, right? And then I sat with it and I was like, okay, I can stay in this pit of wallow right now, watching everyone else's Instagram, like comparing where I'm at now, thinking about losing my 4-minute Ks that I've been working so hard to get over the last six months. Or I can make this journey something that I can work on a weakness right now, right? Like my ski erg is my weaker area of Hyrox. So most of my aerobic capacity stuff is being done on the ergs. Like I've been rowing, I've been skiing. I'm now feeling a bit more confident in those areas of my performance. Okay, it doesn't give me the feeling I feel when I run.
Yeah.
And it's going to take me a while to get my sled work back up to a place. But, you know, I can still do my strength work. I can still do a lot of upper body. I can still work my capacity on the ergs, you know. So I think it's just kind of shifting focus. And, you know, I was dreading 100 calories on the ski erg, you know, just as a cash in round on a workout, you know, dreading it to the point where I actually scrolled past that session on my program and went to the next one. Right. So I think it's just, you know, it's just kind of opening your mind to, okay, like what's showing up for me right now while I'm injured and why. I think that's the biggest thing, you know. Of course, it's going to be frustrating, especially when it's ingrained in our day. But there are things we can do, you know. Could you switch your attention to your nutrition, you know, make that a little bit of a focus for a while, you know?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because actually you mentioned like sports people losing their identity, and that you can see why that is if that they are, if you are whatever, a boxer or something, and you stop boxing, then what are you? What's interesting nowadays with social media is that people that aren't professional sports people at all can still have an identity of being an athlete. I mean, I'm a good example of this in that I'm constantly telling people that all you really need to be, unless you want to be more, but all you really need to be is just a bit above average. And, you know, if everyone's a bit above average, then, you know, the world will be a better place. But equally, when I'm feeling ropey and I don't put a couple of Instagram photographs up for a couple of days, I'm thinking, I'm not having an identity crisis, but I can sense how one could, you know, if you're kind of how best to explain it, if the way you present yourself to the world is through your Instagram or your TikTok or whatever, or your Facebook, and it's in the form of you doing something athletic every day, and suddenly you're not doing that, then yeah, people who are actually not athletes, you know, they might be, well, I don't know, an accountant or something, but suddenly have the same identity problems that a pro footballer might have had, you know, or would indeed have nowadays, but because they are seen by friends and family and their followers as being someone that should be in the gym. So yeah, suddenly when they're not, it's, yeah, well, what's wrong with you? So there's a weird sort of additional pressure that comes from people that kind of live their life. I'm quite careful on my Instagram about making sure that I post as much almost nonsense on there about what my dogs are doing or something as I do training, so to avoid becoming someone whose Instagram looks like an Instagram, because it'd be very easy. It'd be very easy to put a bit of training on there every day and look like I live in the gym, which would not only be a complete lie, wouldn't be very healthy for me or anybody following it. Here's another thing as well, and I get asked this question quite a bit, or not asked this question, I get told this problem, and people then say, "What's the solution?" And something that I've tried to highlight to people, and I guess it does make sense from what you're saying, is when people are ill or injured for whatever reason, they're laid up for a couple of weeks, they can't get in the gym, and I try and tell myself this. 2 weeks will come round. At some point, you will be back in the gym, you know. And actually, the older I get, the more I realise that time is plentiful. In the sense that if someone says to you, "You've got 3 weeks out," 3 weeks is not a long time. You know, 50 years is a long time. 3 weeks isn't. So just chill out. But what you want to be in 3 weeks' time is good to go. And actually, what often happens is in 3 weeks' time, you're a mess because you spent the last 3 weeks just being depressed and eating pizza. And so when it does come round that, like, hey, you're good to go again, your knee now works, you've actually gone backwards. Something I explained to a guy the other day, and hopefully you're going to say, yeah, you're right, and not you're talking nonsense. I was saying, if you spend 3 weeks not exercising, your fitness in the scheme of things isn't going to go massively backwards. If you've been training for donkey's years, you take 3 weeks off, your fitness will be fine. You spend 3 weeks eating 6,000 calories a day, your body fat levels, your nutrition, your health is going to take an absolute hammer blow. So ironically, some people that could just chill out for 3 weeks and then be straight back on it actually find that when they do come back after 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever it is, are actually way, way worse off than they would have been, just because of how they abused themselves needlessly during that layoff.
It's almost like a self-sabotage like behavior, right? So
Yeah.
it's almost like I always think, especially if they're not really, if they don't usually kind of eat a certain way and then their habits change when they can't exercise, it's usually, like I said, self-sabotage is kind of driven from lots of different places. Like it's driven because we feel frustrated or we feel anger towards ourselves for getting injured. Like we can go through this spin of like actually blame of ourselves. So then we don't look after ourselves. We think that, I'll just eat shit. Like it doesn't really matter, you know? But like you said just now, if we can keep our health optimal, the way in which we're going to get, back up to progress is probably going to be, 30% as opposed to starting again from 50%. So, you can definitely control the controllables in those situations as much as possible. However, I know from experience that it is easier said than done at times, and we do have these wobbles along the way where we're like, I think sometimes we want things now, right? Society now, we can push a button and we can get something delivered in the morning. Like we can go on social media and literally just message someone within a second. Like I think our time of patience and tolerance our windows are so much smaller now. Whereas the word I love to use, especially with athletes and with myself, is surrender, right? So there's something empowering about surrendering. So yes, okay, if you are injured, as opposed to fighting it, right? As opposed to not enjoying the process of coming back and actually understanding that this actually could be the making of you, right? Going through this can bring out a whole new level of commitment, discipline, like learning everything, right? So I think that actually sometimes when we surrender to what has shown up and we actually sit and say, okay, well, this is the card I've been dealt right now. We're not thinking about the stuff that we've been through before. We're not thinking about what's to come. But if we actually just sit with what's happening right now and we surrender to, how long it's going to take rather than I need this to be better by World Championships. I need this to be better now. Like there's 10 more World Championship events. There's 10 more Hyrox events. Like there's 10 years left, 15 years left in you, 20 years left, right? So, I think this impatient thing with society nowadays is kind of not potentially helping with things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, I was going to say something that I wonder how much it plays into it nowadays. I might be ruining my chances of a collaboration at a later date with David Goggins, but I wonder that whole kind of David Goggins kind of social media idea of kind of go beast mode and just kind of there is no limit to what the human body can do, and well there is mate to a certain extent.
Of course.
I wonder how much of that plays in nowadays, because I do watch or listen to some people on Instagram and so on, and that kind of Goggins approach to training, do an ultra marathon and your leg falls off at 50k. Well, you still got one leg, haven't you? You crack on and get it done. I wonder how much, that's actually quite damaging to people that think, well, that's the right way to do it, when clearly it isn't. I mean, it's a good way to do it for clicks and likes and actually for one individual it might be. I mean, if you happen to be 200 pounds overweight and want to get into Navy SEALs, then it works. Crack on and do that. But that's one person, it's not the other 8 billion on Earth. It sounds like a damaging way to go.
Yeah, I was actually having this exact conversation about Goggins. I was actually having this exact conversation with a great psychotherapist that I am lucky to call a friend, Matt Gunn. He owns a retreat called Men Without Masks. So he specifically works with men who are very elite, business owners, elite athletes, etc. And we were literally having this discussion the other day about how a lot of trauma is, a lot of pain and trauma, whether that be childhood trauma, whether it be an experience, usually drives, I'm not saying everybody, but usually drives people who have that mentality. It's literally like you feel the pain and you get through it anyway. And sometimes what we have to understand is you have the general population looking up to that who, might not have any background in fitness, might not have any background in eating well, might not have any understanding of, the foundations to get to that level of performance. So they're going out and doing these. It happened in COVID, it happened in lockdown. People were going out and doing an ultra marathon like that the week after never running, and then they've tipped themselves for and it's great. Like, challenges are amazing, but I think that, like you said, I think that this kind of sometimes obsessiveness, I guess, is the biggest thing. Like, this sometimes obsessiveness and this kind of over striving and this kind of, yes, I believe in greatness, but I also believe in the journey to get there and what we learn along the way in that development, right? And I think we have to set a precedent, especially when we're such a big character like that and such essentially a famous person, right? You've got a lot of fame, a lot of followers, a lot of people looking up to you. Sometimes it can be great, but sometimes it could be really damaging, because what if somebody else strives for that and doesn't achieve it? And then they feel like a failure, and that could be feeding into a past trauma of feeling like a failure. So it's quite a kind of dangerous area sometimes for a lot of just general population.
And also where I worry about it is where people aren't enjoying their training, they're not enjoying their diet, they're not enjoying any of it, and someone in that situation should be stopping and thinking, but because do something else. If you're not enjoying whatever it is you're doing, do something else. There's a million. If you're doing Hyrox and you're sick of it, go play badminton.
Absolutely.
And vice versa. But I wonder how many people find themselves feeling like they aren't enjoying what they're doing and tell themselves, no, carry on, because I've got to suffer, because rest when you're dead, and that whole kind of if you aren't suffering, you aren't living kind of nonsense that does my head in. I just wonder how many people actually are out there kind of depressed and hating their training regime and their diet. And actually, there's a really great training regime they could be doing and a really good diet they could be enjoying, but they don't bother trying to explore and find it because they think, no, it's supposed to suck. In fact, embrace the suck is another one that's kind of thrown out there. And again, if you're someone that responds to that and that motivates you, then great. And actually, I do a little bit. I like that. I mean, I'll watch Goggins, and it will make me think, I want to go running at 2:00 in the morning, and I want to do that. But I'm also old enough to know that to know where to draw the line with that, and I don't I'm not going to do it every day, and it's completely inappropriate for many people. So it does. I do get a little bit worried about how much nonsense there is.
I think the thing is as well is actually like just raising that question again, especially with people that like love challenges like that and love these kind of extraordinary things, like getting up at 2 a.m. or, doing something crazy, like running, a marathon every day for 30 days. I think it's that question of like the question I would pose to somebody just because of just general interest is why? I think that's the biggest question. Okay, yes, then they might answer, I see it as a challenge, right? Okay, that's cool. But if you go that layer deeper, what is driving you to do something? Are you enjoying the training for it? Are you enjoying the process? What happens when you've done that challenge? Like you're bound to want to go bigger and better. There is a lot of pressure, I think, sometimes, especially like you said, going kind of linking this back to the social media like image, right? And I fall guilty of it sometimes. Like I post things just because I'm like, oh my God, I haven't posted for 3 days. People are going to think I'm not okay, And if I don't post something, they'll be like, where are you okay? Like some of my clients will message, they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. I'm just being for once.
Yes.
Like I'm actually just being with self, and it's a snapshot window. Instagram, social media is a snapshot window into somebody's life, and I'm a little bit different to you. Like I do like putting some bits of my personal life, and there's been those conversations where I'm like, maybe I should show more of Jade me, because sometimes you fall into this trap of having to constantly put out content about Hyrox, because that's what you are, that's who you are, right? Actually, like I said when we first come on the call, like actually it's nice sometimes to just be Jade, like
absolutely
not just Hyrox Jade,
because there are. I mean. Some of the girls that Jen follows on Instagram, every photograph is just a ripped six-pack. I mean, every photograph, and the pressure they must feel under to daily have a ripped six-pack to post, and then the pressure is probably the wrong word, but certainly the influence that they apply to those looking at that is that, I mean, it's all, yeah. I mean, the other thing that people should note as well, as somebody who has done dumb YouTube challenges, I wouldn't, and I daren't speak for other idiots on YouTube, but as an idiot on YouTube, I wouldn't do half the things I do if I weren't on YouTube. I mean, there's plenty of them I would do. Absolutely, I would absolutely do Hyrox. I'd definitely run ultra marathons. I'd do lots of it, but I wouldn't run an ultra marathon with zero training because that's just stupid. But it's very funny and entertaining for YouTube. I wouldn't do Hyrox with a weighted vest. I wouldn't do park run with my kid in a backpack. I wouldn't do any of it. So when people see that and go, "Oh wow, that's inspiring," it's motivating. The idea is it's supposed to be just funny. People are just supposed to go, "Ha ha," but park run looks good, and then they go and do a park run. They aren't supposed to be inspired to go and do, or even not necessarily to do daft things, but they aren't even supposed to think that doing daft things is to be admired. I try my hardest to explain to people what I'm doing here is daft, and you're supposed to find it funny, and then go and have a sensible workout. You're not supposed to do it. So yeah, when you see people doing things, you think, wow, they did whatever 15 marathons back to back. If you know about it, then you have to question whether they'd have done it, whether people wouldn't know about it. I wonder how many people do 15 marathons back to back and don't tell anybody. I imagine very few, because back to your question, why, there is no answer to I did 15 marathons back to back. The only answer is why, because it was good content.
For sure.
That's the only answer, really. Or I'm a lunatic.
And charity is a big one, isn't it?
Absolutely,
a lot of people do things.
And it's a valid one. But I mean, it's a valid one, but it doesn't actually necessarily raise what you did to the level of sensible. I mean, I did Hyrox in a weighted vest for charity, and we raised a chunk of money, and that's amazing. But it was stupid to do. My knees are wrecked. I don't mind. I'm expendable. I in that sense. If my knees stopped working tomorrow completely, I'd take up something else. So I'm really relaxed about the whole thing.
What would that be? I would love to know what that would be.
Do you know what? I quite fancy kite surfing. But don't start me because yeah, I'll be kite surfing before you know it. So yeah, and I'm now wondering if you need your knees for kite surfing. You might.
I can see it now. GoPro hanging off your forehead.
Yeah,
just absolutely going for it.
Yeah, don't because now I'm going to start googling kite surfing kit. Okay, let's finish up with this one. When you've done something, well, actually, this flows nicely. When you've done something, not necessarily quite as stupid as the things I've done, but you've expended a ton of energy. You've done an ultramarathon or a triathlon or a Hyrox. Basically, you've done something that the next day you wake up and feel, oh my goodness, I feel run over. I trained for that thing. I did it. I crushed it. Now what? Because most times that I do that, and I'm a perfect example of probably what not to do. And Hyrox I do this at. I do Hyrox. In fact, we did last time, didn't we, Jen? We did Hyrox and we went out for drinks. In fact, we did, what was our post Hyrox meal, because I ran in the men's pro, so it was late at night. We had a 2 a.m. What do we have?
Bar snacks.
Yeah, 2 a.m. But we're in a bar snacking at 2 a.m. I'm expecting you to say that my body is looking for certain things in the hours following a Hyrox, and it's not bar snacks at 2 a.m.
I mean, it should be restoring at 2 a.m. depending on what time you got up. It should be sleeping. However,
yeah, I was probably up at 6.
Yeah. So essentially, it's there's a lot of things that there's a lot of kind of moving parts to this, right? Because essentially, if you are somebody who is, competing essentially as a competitor for a competitive time, you've got other events coming up that are within a fairly short window. You've got another event in 6 weeks' time. You've got another event in 8 weeks' time. You've got a world championships you've qualified for in a couple of months. Then you're obviously going to be really, really totally aware of, or you're going to hopefully be really aware of how quickly you want to be kind of recovering and getting back into training, right?
Yeah,
because your next phase of training is like an adaptive phase. So, you getting ill up 2 weeks after an event or feeling run down or not recovering effectively is going to eat up into your recovery and training time for your next event. So But if you are somebody who is, just taking part for fun, sometimes you can get away with, the kind of risk of, suppressing your immune system a little bit. And, you want to reward yourself and have a little bit of a fun time, right? Like, people have parties after World Championship events at the end of the season, but they do that at the end of the season for a reason, right? They've got the whole off season. They might go on holiday. They can chill out, let their body recover. But I think the biggest thing is understanding that after you've pushed your body through something like an ultramarathon or a Spartan race or a Hyrox where you're working at threshold, when you've done these kind of events that you've been ultimately peaking for, you have to remember that it's not just the event that has taken it out of you, it's the whole compound effect of every training session that has got you to that peak, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, what we have to understand is, one, what am I doing leading up to the event? So it's not just the action we take in the window after the race. What we do up to the event is really important as well. So like, am I fueling correctly? Have I got enough glycogen in my body to not hit a complete, depletion in the event? So those kind of things are really important. Hydration. Am I having, enough salts, electrolytes leading up to the race? And also, am I rested? So sometimes actually we can overdo it in the taper period of an event. So when we should actually be pulling the body back slightly in volume, we're actually still training at the intensity and volume all the way through to the event, which can also cause an impact on our body after the race as well. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Essentially we want to be kind of keeping the intensity, but stripping back some volume leading up to the race. So that, if we're training loads of volume still in the whole week, it just has a whole week impact as opposed to just the race impact. So those are a couple of things that you can really think about before leading up to the race. But after the race, you've got what we call an immune window, which is 48 hours. As soon as you cross that finish line, right, your immune system, well, even in the race. Yeah. So the amount of people I speak to and they're like, I picked up a bug at the race. Everyone fell down with COVID last year, I think, in one of the races.
The only time I had COVID was 48 hours after, I think it was Birmingham. I was Manchester,
I think, wasn't it?
And this will tee up nicely what you're about to say, I expect, because I did Manchester. And then we drove from Manchester to about Worcester. We stopped at halfway to see friends, and we were out till 5 a.m. and eating rubbish, and then went to bed for about an hour, and then drove the rest of the way home. So I then got home, and exactly as you say, I picked up a bug doing it was COVID, doing Hyrox. And what was interesting was that I expect over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been exposed to the COVID bug a million times. I mean, I would have encountered it. Of course, I would have encountered it and shrugged it off within a moment's notice a million times. The only time it got me and found my front door open, as it were, was when I was eating Pringles at 4 a.m.
And I like that term you just used, found me with my front door open, because when you are in that event and you're in that last 15 minutes of that event, and we all know how the wall balls feel, we all know how that last kilometer feels, right? And when we're in that element of threshold, when our body is in that that automatic state of the highest level of adrenaline, the highest level of cortisol, and everything else going on in our body at that time, while also being in our reserve tank of every mineral and vitamin, because we've literally expended the whole lot.
Yeah.
Our body, as soon as we cross that finish line and we lay on the floor on our back, looking up at our time, just hoping that it's faster, that specific moment from that point to the Monday after the race, your body is literally screaming out for help. It's screaming out because it's inflamed. It's, you've had all the adrenaline lead up as well, which is obviously raised a lot. And, your hormonal disruption as well from racing that hard. There's a lot of things going on in your endocrine system. Your hormones are all over the place. And so what our body needs is rebalancing, right? So it needs goodness, it needs nourishment, it needs everything. So, had you have maybe, it's a good example, had you have really nourished your body in that time, it could be that you came in contact with the virus, but your body was kind of in a good enough state to kind of fight that off over that next 48 hours, right? Yeah. It's interesting that it actually hit you on the Monday rather than the Sunday, right?
Yeah, it was Monday. So, yeah. On the Sunday, I was still digesting Pringles and Jack Daniels.
But that's the thing, and I think that, if we can, if we can really nourish our body, like we'd actually be better to kind of like celebrate the weekend after, because
Yes,
we can
exactly. Yeah, and again, coming back to kind of like takeaways from this for me is exactly that. I mean, actually, I think I'd be more sensible, because one of the traps I fall. I mean, this kind of encompasses everything we've been saying. When I come away from anything, a Hyrox or an ultra or anything that's kind of left me blown out, I feel all the things we've been talking about. I feel very fit and healthy because I've just done something quite impressive, and therefore I think I can get away with doing daft things. I feel very hungry. My body is crying out for everything, and when my body says, "Oh, sodium," I think, well, you need some Chris then. So it's a perfect storm after something like that for me to just descend into just junk food hell. And actually, if I did wait a week and thought I'll have my treat day in a week's time, by then I would have come down a little bit and I would be in a better place to make better decisions, and would still have a cheat day, but it wouldn't be well. In fact, we did a YouTube video on a drive back from doing Spartan Beast in Scotland, where I what did I
We did like 8 hours of eating crap.
Oh, I know what it was. I'd done the trifecta. So I had burnt 9,000 calories racing at Spartan, and I ate them. I ate 9,000 calories in the drive back down in the car, which which actually wasn't that hard to do. I just ate constantly.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and I felt fine doing it. I thought, well, I'm athletic. I've just done something pretty crazy. I'm only eating back what I expended, and my body appears to be wanting it severely. So it almost felt like it made sense, and yet clearly 9,000 calories of KFC and Burger King and McDonald's made no sense at all. It was just ridiculous. Had I waited a week's time and said a week later, for no reason at all, I think I'll eat 9,000 calories of junk food today, it would have been literally nonsensical. Whereas in the aftermath of the event, it almost seemed appropriate.
For sure. And you've got the window, right? I'll put it that way. Like, you basically have like a refeed window as well. And this is something that people can take away from this as well with training. So to get your recovery really, really spot on between training sessions, it's really important to kind of like really pay attention to the timing of your nutrition after a training event. So really, we kind of want, to replenish glycogen and replenish protein, especially within sort of like 45 minutes of a training session, especially glycogen. Otherwise, we get sort of like later in the day, our glucose levels are really low. And then we're going to be craving things that are, essentially simple sugars. We're going to be craving a lot of, simple sugars. We're going to reach for stuff that probably is, again, beige food or doesn't really have much nutritional value. And then we go on this whole kind of spiral again. So it's really important to kind of, especially after Hyrox, is to kind of, even though sometimes you don't actually feel like eating because your stomach has shrunk so much during the event, which it naturally happens, it is really important to get something back in, whether it be in liquid form. So it could be like a protein shake or, something of nutritional value back in the system within like 45 minutes, because that will it saves you hitting that. Let's say you've raced at like 4 o'clock and then you haven't eaten anything until like 8-9 o'clock at night. It saves you hitting that point where you're like, okay, now I need everything in sight, right? And then that's sometimes hard for a human to be like, oh, I know, I'll order a Buddha bowl. You know what I mean? So it's
and when I am being sensible, I mean, if I go and do, I do a few races during the summer in Wales, trail races over the mountains with the dog, and there's nothing. One of the benefits of it is when I finish those races in the middle of nowhere, there's nothing to get. You can't eat anything. There's nothing to eat out there, in the middle of Wales. Obviously, there's lots of people in Wales now saying, "Hang on a minute, we have civilization. What are you on about?" Where I'm racing, there's not an immediate McDonald's outside the venue, so when I'm sat in the field afterwards, I will have brought my protein shake and a bagel and some peanut butter and stuff, and I will sensibly replenish myself. And by the time I drive the 2.5-3 hours home, I feel fine. I don't have any crazy cravings. Ironically, when I'm in the middle of London or any big city, and I know that I can just walk out the hotel or not even walk out the hotel. I mean, what did we do? Where were we last time that we did? Actually, it was Manchester, wasn't it? So in Manchester last time, we phoned, who are the guys that come on the bicycles? Deliveroo. Little man on the bicycle came and brought us the food. So I didn't even have to.
I hope you tipped him.
Actually,
pedaling all that way.
He came from. That was the thing. That's the thing. He came from around the corner. I could have walked easily to the burger place. Yeah, it's a 15-minute walk, but I don't. My knees hurt. I mean, what am I supposed to do? So, ironically, when I'm somewhere where I can get just anything, I'll eat just anything. If all my races were in the middle of nowhere, I'd be when I'm self-sufficient. And interestingly, when I'm making those preparations in the cold light of day before the event, I make sensible decisions. When I make a decision in a hotel room where I've got no food left, and I'll make a stupid decision if I'm post race. Yeah. So I do say to people that do Hyrox, when they say, "Oh yeah, what do you pack in your gym bag?" I do say, protein shake or something for afterwards that is sensible to eat, because otherwise you will find yourself going out, and even if you then go out after your protein shake, you're probably not going to eat quite so much and have quite the cravings that you'd have if you went out hungry. But yeah, I wonder how many people, especially first timers, go to something like Hyrox with any thought whatsoever to what they're doing in the hour afterwards.
Sure, yeah, and it's really important to get that kind of like that sort of carbohydrate refeed in with, essentially complex carbs are going to really, yes, it is important to have an element of simple carbs quite quickly because they obviously get back in your system fairly quick, so like you said, your bagels and things like that are going to go back in quite quick. But later in the day, it's actually really important to then have those complex carbohydrates and that protein and kind of replenish all of the kind of main macros, because most people, when they have done a Hyrox event, will really struggle the night after with disrupted sleep. And it's usually because of hormonal disruption. So, I've experienced it a lot where, I'll wake up like I'm knackered, but I wake up wide awake at like 1 o'clock in the morning and I could go run around the city, and I'm still kind of on this kind of, adrenaline ride wave essentially. So kind of, if you do have a really good balanced meal, and your sugar levels aren't like that through the night, it's going to kind of help with that next night of sleep, which is essential. Again, it's really important, especially if you are an athlete in that competitive standard who is striving to, compete really well in their next event, because you want to, like I said, you want to be back in the gym and recovered as quickly as possible. You don't want to be, sorry, the dog, you don't want to be getting, you don't want to be getting, ill, having to have a week out, getting an injury, and things like that, which can always happen when you're in sort of that, what I call that sort of high inflammatory state after a heavy race, But there's also the question that you were asking about recovery as well. How many rest days should I take? Should I be resting fully after a race? And I think it's not really a one size fits all. I actually do better. For me personally, I do better with one full rest day on the Sunday after an event on a Saturday, and then an active recovery day on the Monday, where I just keep the heart rate going, but actually get the blood pumping. If I take 2 rest days, my Tuesday is always a lot worse.
Well, interestingly, for a lot of people, that Monday is when the DOMs will be worse.
Yeah.
That they'll not feel too bad on the Sunday, and then the Monday is when they realise they can't sit down or stand up or walk around.
For sure.
And yeah, that's the day when in their head they're thinking, especially if the Sunday was all right, they're thinking, oh, I might get back in the gym, I might do something on Monday. And then they wake up on Monday and think, "Oh my goodness, that was I don't feel ready for anything." Actually, which is an important question. Actually, if you're just feeling DOMS, if you're just feeling everything's okay, but you've got this delayed onset muscle soreness, that I get it, but quads predominantly, glutes from doing the wall balls and the lunges. Do you just jog through that, suck it up? My dad would say, my dad again would say, you're sore, you're supposed to be sore, just run.
I think the thing, how to approach that, and the best advice I can give on that is to, one, listen to your body from like day to day after the event for probably 7 days after, because we can also experience a lot of things kind of emotionally and mentally after a heavy race as well. It's something we've trained hard for in most cases. It's something we've peaked for. And what we can sometimes kind of experience the week after a heavy race is like actually feeling quite demotivated. And we can actually feel quite sort of disconnected to the goal, because we're like, oh, I did it.
The goal's gone. Isn't
what
it?
really now,
Yeah.
you're almost sick of the sight of lunges and burpees, and wall balls. So what I like to do the week after the race and sometimes explore with the guys I coach is just doing something really different that week, still a similar kind of stimulus of kind of zone 2, but keeping the intensity down, keeping any, we don't want to be trying to make any adaptations in that week after a race because our body just needs that time to restore, recover. You think you've broken your body completely, your muscle fibers are torn if you've pushed yourself. So, yes, sometimes active recovery really helps on the Monday and actually doing something, because sometimes that DOMS will then probably get worse with time.
Yes.
So if we can actually get an element of blood flow to the muscles on that Monday, or a sports massage or something like that, it can actually start the healing process a lot faster.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, that's fascinating, and it's been a fascinating conversation. I'm the older I get, and not that these are issues that obviously are particular to old people at all, but these are things that when I was 20, I just didn't care about. I would just go and do whatever I wanted to do, and I wouldn't necessarily get away with it. I mean, I can remember running Reading half marathon when I was about 19 and completely unable to run anywhere, but did it. And then ate a Chinese afterwards, and I don't think I've ever been quite so sick again in my life. So it wasn't that I got away with being an idiot. I just didn't care, because, when you're 20, 18, 19, 20, being an idiot is just part of life. But at nearly 50, it becomes a bit more annoying to be ill and laid up and just feeling, you just don't want to feel rough. So I do try my hardest to pay attention when sensible people are saying sensible things. So
Sure.
I've got a little list now of things I'm going to take away and try and do a bit better.
There you go. Another really important thing as well is that I nearly forgot to mention is leading into the event is very carbohydrate focused. Post event is very protein focused, because obviously the protein is going to help the repair.
Yes.
Whereas the carbs, the carbohydrate, this complex carbohydrates are going to help the energy systems that we're going to use for Hyrox.
Yes, absolutely. Which I had at the back of my head has been my plan anyway. Actually, something that's probably for a conversation for another day. One of the problems that I have going into Hyrox, and I can't be alone in this, is that I always go into Hyrox wanting to be lighter than I am, as a consequence of being heavier than I should be. And so I have this real balance that I try and manage. I fail to manage, which is, in very simple terms, not eating anything so that I'm nice and light, but obviously eating something so that I can still move around. Every time I go in, I go into it thinking I need to be 3 or 4 kilos lighter. So my priority is just eat less. And going back to what you were saying earlier about not only fueling for the event, but fueling for the come down, I'm not fueling for any of it. I'm fueling for being too fat.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is actually like there's kind of a, rather than doing things kind of like rash, there's also that, again, that's like probably a whole nother conversation to do with, actual kind of like, body mass versus performance, and like where that perfect sits for someone, right? And we could spend like hours talking about that, what is the perfect weight, or how do I manage it so that, because a calorie deficit for the performance of Hyrox and the training for Hyrox is quite a dangerous place to sometimes be, right? Because you've got the thing of, so sometimes it's actually more about kind of like where those calories are coming from that can essentially sometimes help you lean out, because we actually sometimes store excess body fat, not just because we're in a calorie surplus, but also because our body is not essentially having food that it's utilizing and using. So it's storing. So if we can really think about kind of like where our calories are actually coming from, is it good foods? Are they colorful? Is it good quality protein? Is it simple, complex carbohydrates that our body can break down and use as energy? Or is it simple carbs that our body's just going to go, Phew, I'm just going to store this quickly, for a rainy day. So it's actually more about kind of like where the calories are coming from. But it's also about, like, I was talking to Karina Coffin about this, who's actually we're doing a collaboration together. She's a sports dietitian, CrossFit Games athlete, Spartan Games athlete. And, she does a lot in the world of sports nutrition. And we're actually going to be doing a world's preparation nutrition program together for clients. So, we were literally talking about this on a call last night, and she was saying, sometimes for performance, you have to alter your performance goals. And sometimes, especially for females, that again, like you said, on Instagram we see all these like washboard abs and stuff.
Yeah,
we have to sometimes our better performances are when we're a little bit fluffier, you know, because we're actually eating enough food to actually fuel that event, right? As opposed to just like body image goals.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, yeah, if I could kind of click my fingers, I'd want to run Hyrox at about 6% body fat. But in terms of performance, that would be terrible. The only thing I'd perform well at would be the photographs. That would be it. I wonder how many. Yeah, I mean, bearing in mind a lot of the guys are, how many of the guys are going into Hyrox fueling for not running in their shirt, and the women are running in booty shorts and a sports bra, and I wonder some of them might give them no thought whatsoever. But I guess we're all human beings. I imagine many of them are aware of how they're going to look, and I wonder who. Well, I know, Jen. I know you. We're often talking about what when you talk about what do we want to be like when we come around to Hyrox. How you want to look is a part of that, and anyone sitting at home thinking, "No, not for me, it's not." Well, it is for many, because otherwise they wouldn't make a fortune selling the photographs. The photographs wouldn't be everybody's Facebook profile picture. I mean, how you look at Hyrox is a massive part of it, no matter what anybody says. It's a massive part of it. Otherwise, they'd have no photographers there because nobody would be interested. They go, "No, I just did it for the experience. I don't need a memento." Of course you do, and you want to look good in it, because oddly, who wouldn't want to look good? So yeah, it is an interesting one. I go into it fueling every time badly. I go into it fueling for the rope pull photograph as a priority. I mean, literally, I'll practice that in the gym, just holding it for a bit longer so the guy can get a nice sharp shot.
And I used to be like that, especially like as a female in sort of like, from professional sport background, football kit didn't matter. We weren't running around a football pitch in our sports bra,
Yeah.
But as soon as I started getting into the Spartan space, then started to see people running Spartan races in booty shorts and a sports bra. It's like, okay, like, this is now playing on a little bit of something different here. I actually used to find myself in my mid-20s, like a little bit like yourself, actually literally, cutting back on calories when I should probably be more in a surplus, just because, I wanted the perfect like Herc hoist photo, like leaning back, like getting that photo in. And I, like you said, I think people would be lying if they said that, that didn't cross their mind, and I think if we can get into this space where we're like, okay, food is fuel. What shape my body takes when I'm fueling correctly is where my body wants to be, right? And I think if we can get into that mindset, your body isn't going to. The thing is, your body is not going to ever store any too much excess body fat when you're in a healthy internal terrain. So if your body is healthy, I can be eating 3,000 calories a day, and healthy calories, like food that my body is just constantly using. And not have a high body fat percentage, whereas I could actually, and it's been the case before where actually, I sometimes actually I'm not in alignment sometimes with actually being in a calorie deficit and not caring where my calories are coming from. Like I have actually looked fluffier, that's the best way to put it, around the edges when I've actually been eating half the calories but from shit food. So it's all kind of down to I'm very much an advocate for performance over body shape as much as possible. And I think if I can bring this on podcasts like this to the world of Hyrox, when let's be honest, it could potentially scare people off, because they're too scared to do it because of what they'll look like, or they walk into the arena and they see 86,000 people in booty shorts.
Well, it's why I did the podcast a couple of weeks ago with a guy called Mark Smith, who ran Hyrox at about 17.5 stone. I think he's basically very early into, or relatively early into, his weight loss journey. So he hasn't lost all the weight he wants to lose. He's still a big guy. And the reason I was so fascinated by that was that when I've been on that journey myself, I went from 23 stone down to where I am now. And I would never I would never in my early years of that journey have gone to something like Hyrox. I didn't even want to go to the gym without 15 layers on. And so he was just like, no, why do I care? I'm on a journey. I'm going to enjoy it. And it was inspirational. It inspired me listening to it. It was quite ironic actually, because he said I only did Hyrox because I saw your video and it inspired me to go and do it.
But I love
and I was like, dude, you're inspiring me to go and work out now and not worry too much about how fluffy I look, because he's a fluffy guy, and didn't care. And like, why should he care? He's 40 something. He's got donkey's years to be whatever shape he wants to be.
Of course.
But I did say that, well, he knew this because he'd seen my videos, but I say it to anyone that hasn't. When you go to something like Hyrox and you walk in, your first gut reaction is, oh my goodness, it is filled with kind of Baywatch models. But actually, when you stop and just watch the runners, I tell everyone that does this, when you get there your first time, go to the running track and just stand for 10 minutes and watch the runners go past. And you'll suddenly realise that actually there's a ton of normal people there. That there's people that are too heavy. There's people that are small, short. I mean, everybody is there. And you suddenly think, actually, this is going to be fine. What was quite interesting was that Stuart last week was looking for someone old and realised that he couldn't find anybody as old as him. So he was literally the oldest person there. But normally, most people are going to find somebody that is, whatever, shorter than you, taller than you, fatter than you, thinner than you. There is literally everything there. So Mark Smith and lugging himself around in a couple of hours was absolutely doing the right thing to do. And someone sitting at home thinking, I won't do it yet because I need to lose a couple of pounds more. Obviously don't do something you're uncomfortable with, but equally you don't need to worry about that. Get along there and just do it.
Sure.
And don't go out for cocktails and bar snacks afterwards. Cool.
Everything in moderation. Everything in moderation. That's what I say.
Absolutely. I still think we have issues with you understanding what I interpret moderation to be, but we'll leave.
We'll get there.
We'll leave that for another day. Yeah. Cool, Jade. It has been awesome talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. You can go and play with your dog now, who sounds like that they want some.
I think they've just eaten the postman, so it's fine. The delivery man. He ran halfway up the road as soon as he saw him.
Well, that's all right.
He's bigger than me.
He's installing fitness in others. That's good. Cool, super. It was great talking to you. And again, thanks for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate being on here, and I'm loving every minute of working with Jen. So
no, indeed, and I should say, I should wrap up by saying thank you for that, because you have everyone says that I say everyone says, no one says actually that I'm the person that's responsible for this, but everyone does say it's quite cool that your wife has gone from someone that was just kind of not out of shape at all, but not particularly into fitness, to someone who is now, comically, in a way, a fitness influencer. It is quite... In fact, actually, I'm going to tell this story very quickly. Jen was getting her nails done today, and the guy doing her nails, just chit-chat, asked her what she did for a living, and she said, I'm a YouTuber. And it just made me chuckle that he didn't believe her. No, she wasn't in her booty shorts and sports bra. That would have nailed it. But yeah, it's just quite funny that you have been instrumental in that conversion of her to basically living the same ridiculous lifestyle that I now live.
You really have.
So thank you for that. You have transformed her and us.
There's still more to come, Mark Lewis.
I know. I'm slightly concerned that she's going to get...
I would be concerned.
Yeah, I am. We might have to have a separate conversation about when you need to sort of start
slowing her down.
Yeah, you need to start giving her exercises that are of no value whatsoever, bearing in mind my decrepit knees and so on. But
I have a nice mix, because I have Jade's expertise of making me do the workouts and planning them for me, and I have you in the gym saying, go on, you can do one more. You can do one more. You can do one more. I'm like, okay.
Yes, indeed. And a podcast for another day is how to install, motivation and enthusiasm and drive.
I think it's fear that you install.
Yeah, I just seem to scare her. Which isn't ideal. Superb.
Different types of motivation.
Yeah, and mine appears to be useless. Is the gist. Cool. Jade,
No,
thanks,
it's been
thanks
amazing.
again. And
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
I
We'll talk soon.
appreciate it. We will. Take care.